Market Journal, Television for Agricultural Business Decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Hello everyone, I'm Bryce Duskett and thank you for joining us today on Market Journal. For some producers, harvest is officially in the books. Attention is now turning to fall fieldwork and anhydrous application. In whatever stage of fall you find yourself today, we sure appreciate you joining us for another edition of the show. We begin today's broadcast with a look back to a big groundbreaking event for the university. Last Friday, donors, cattle producers, packers, and several representatives from the University of Nebraska Lincoln were on hand at the Eastern Nebraska Research and Extension Center, or NREC, to celebrate a new state-of-the-art feedlot innovation center. This new facility will provide the capacity to develop and evaluate emerging technologies used in managing animals in feedlot settings. Featuring the latest innovations, a commercial-scale feedlot, and an animal handling facility, this will be used in teaching, research, and extension efforts by the Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.
So it'll be very unique in a lot of aspects. One, it'll be the only facility that has both cattle confinement barns as well as open pens. Some of those innovations in both of those spaces. The open pens, we're talking about roller compacted concrete and comparing concrete versus dirt. The advantage is that you can capture clean manure off of concrete, which of course from being able to capture nutrients from that in terms of methane digestion and capturing those energy sources back will be a great opportunity for this facility. Really, then the cattle confinement, the deep pitted barns, same kind of things, being able to capture that effluent. Think about nutrient capture and nutrient recycling so that we're containing those nutrients in a closed system, being able to put those back on croplands, again, to support the entire agricultural system. So really thinking beyond just feedlot production per se, but thinking more from a systems perspective. Also, the processing facility is going to have flexible space where we can move in new technologies around animal handling and well-being. Very hot topic. So few people involved in production agriculture, and of course we want to innovate in ways that allows us to connect our producers with our consumers, and so having those technologies in a facility that allows us to demonstrate animal handling, animal care and welfare, and really get folks that come from more urban environments, our consumers, to come observe and get hands-on experience will be a tremendous opportunity in this facility.
The project was approved by the Board of Regents on June 23rd. With an estimated price tag of $7.5 million, the project is being funded through a combination of private giving, grants, and IANR program funds. Most recently, Greater Omaha Packing Company announced a $700,000 gift for the project.
So many people involved, right? So I'm privileged to be a part of IANR, but from Clint Crable, the department head, Galen Erickson, who drives our beef feedlot nutrition, to Ruth Woody, one of our newest faculty thinking about animal handling, but our partners at Farm Credit Services, at JBS US, at Greater Omaha. So from the folks who will be taking these cattle and processing them, their deep interest. All of these folks, Glenda and Dennis Bosinger, and then in-kind contributions around the concrete, around the handling facilities, the pens. It's just been inspirational. I think the one thing, though, is we're all interested in sustainable beef production, and that really made it a little easier. We didn't start having the conversations about, would you consider giving? It was really, what's important to you, what's important to us, and we found that common ground. And here we are, $7.5 million later, we're breaking ground on this amazing innovation platform.
The new facility is expected to be home to nearly 2,200 additional head of cattle by August or September of next year. The new center will also be a key component of UNL's Beef Innovation Hub, which aims to advance, support, and communicate continuous improvement of beef production, economic vitality, and natural resources stewardship through innovative research, education, and extension. If you'd like to learn more about the goals of this project, we've added some additional information. You can find it on the Market Journal website. Also happening last week out at NREC, producers and educators were on hand to discuss grazing cover crops at this year's Cover Crop Grazing Conference. This expo seeks to assist first-time or experienced farmers looking to fine-tune their cover crop grazing management by utilizing cover crops as an alternative forage source. For more on this story, we turn to Market Journal's Bill Dodd. Bill?
Thanks, Bryce. That's right. Last week, guest speakers and panelists addressed important issues for Nebraska farmers and ranchers by presenting attendees with research-based information, as well as a productive panel discussion with Nebraska producers on the best practices for utilizing cover crops. Grazing cover crops isn't a new trend by any means. However, this is a practice that started to decline nearly a half-century ago. Now, this particular program delivered information to area producers on ways cover crops can help prevent soil erosion, improve nutrient cycling, and help the environment as well as the producer's bottom line.
So the purpose of today's conference is, grazing cover crops is kind of an older thing that we let go by the wayside for a little while. 50 years ago, we used to utilize it to feed cows and went away from that as we saw grain prices go higher. And then as we've started to look at more of a systems approach to agriculture, we're able to utilize cover crops to not only graze during times when we wouldn't potentially be able to graze, but also to give back and promote soil health as well.
The day's event was set up to tackle issues found most pressing by attendees. Topics of interest for this conference were selected due to the results of a recent producer survey. Now, by focusing on what producers were concerned about, two main topics at this event centered on rotational and strip grazing, as well as grazing perennial and annual forages.
So we had two keynote speakers. The first one was Ben Beckman, and he spoke on sectional and rotational grazing. And then also Brad Schick. Both of them are extension educators, and Brad spoke on the usage of annual and perennial forage crops. And the reason that we chose these is because we've held focus groups and utilized some of the survey data from last year's program, and these are the things that the producers here in eastern Nebraska felt were pertinent for them to know to take back to their operations.
While the lecture portion of this series is educational and informative, there's always something to be said for peer-to-peer conversation and feedback. Now, this portion of the conference gave attendees a great opportunity for a very productive small group discussion.
I think that it not only allows the attendees to get into a more conversational mode, to be able to ask the questions that are specifically on their mind rather than a lecture style complete program. So we do that so they can get some feedback and create a discussion between people who are utilizing cover crops in their day-to-day production agriculture to speak with other people who maybe want to learn. And so this program is set up for those who have never grazed cover crops before and those who have been doing it for years and are looking to find out more information on it.
Beyond keynote speakers and panel discussions, attendees were also treated to a live field demonstration that really helped put current cover crop research into context and gave producers some hard evidence to run with when devising their own cover crop strategies.
We have some mixes of cover crops that we've been planting for about 5 years now, and just look at the nutritive value of those different mixes and what they can do for producers on their farms and how they can graze those. And then also some of the research that Dr. Mary Dranowski is doing here at the Eastern Nebraska Research Extension and Education Center to learn a little bit more about some of the data that we've collected here at the university.
If you'd like to learn more about options for grazing cover crops, you can find everything you might want to know about the subject by visiting CropWatch and beefwatch.unl.edu. And if you'd like to learn more about any future conferences or extension field days, you can stay up to date on the latest extension events by visiting the Nebraska Extension Calendar webpage by following the URL there at the bottom of your screen. Now, we've also taken the liberty of posting that link along with this story on the Market Journal website. Bryce, we'll send it back to you.
All right, thanks for those highlights, Bill. We'll have some additional information from this year's Cover Crop Grazing Conference in the coming weeks. Turning our attention over to the markets now. Earlier in the week, we were joined by UNL Livestock Marketing and Risk Management Specialist Elliott Dennis. As we like to do, we had the chance to ask Elliott about the cattle markets, but we began the discussion by getting an update on highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI. Joining us today is Elliott Dennis, UNL Livestock Market Economist. Elliott, it's great to have you back here on Market Journal. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's begin today's conversation discussing highly pathogenic avian influenza. We've talked about this for quite some time now, and it seems like the headlines are not quite going away just yet. What can you share with our viewers?
Yeah, well, it's continued to go up since we've talked about it pretty much every time. We were at about 45 million in the summer, and now we're peaked at a little bit over 50 million. And we look at kind of the distribution of where this is happening. We're seeing it happen a lot in egg layers. So not surprisingly, Iowa and Nebraska are some of the largest states that are hit by this. I think when we look at total impact, Iowa is about 30% of all that production of the damage impacts, and Nebraska is about 10%. We add in Turkey with Minnesota, and we're pretty much at about 70% on the top 5 states. So it is still here, and some states are having a greater impact than others. And it's really, ultimately, it's affecting the price that we're going to pay for eggs, for chicken, and for turkeys, particularly around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Turkey Day is coming up.
Yeah.
Consumers are going to notice a price there, or just maybe chalk it up as inflation this year. Is it going to be noticeable?
There is a little bit due to inflation, but there is about a 30% increase over the last year, and a lot of that has to do with kind of the high path depopulation that's been happening in the turkey population. So we should expect some higher prices. I think that Tom 16 to 24 pound should be around that 185 range per pound.
We'll definitely keep an eye on that. Elliott, let's switch up this conversation, talk about the cattle markets. Here in the month of November, what are you seeing big picture there?
Yeah, I think that the big thing is we're seeing elevated fed cattle weights still. I mean, we're looking at the fed steer that's being harvested. It's around 930 pound dressed. And so that's considerably higher than we would expect at this time. But when slaughter weights go up, we tend to see that drop in price. We're still pretty much on an upswing on a lot of this price. We're at about the 152 live weight range, or live, and about 240 on the dressed carcass. And so I think even though we're having some difficulty in the market, prices are still kind of rising. The thing that I'm most concerned about, and I'm looking, is we tend to be pretty front heavy right now, particularly here in Nebraska. We've pulled a lot of cattle forward given where we're at in the drought. And so where we actually go forward into 2023 and into 2024 as far as beef production kind of remains to be seen.
Did you bring your crystal ball to tell us, are those high prices here to stick around for a little bit longer?
Fortunately, it broke on the way over here, so I won't be able to provide that.
Well, a couple other things that have been happening. The meat packers came together, I understand. You can share some details on this, but they came together and committed to lowering their emissions. What can you share with the viewers?
Yeah, so basically a big summit's going on over in the Middle East right now. All the global community is getting together and they're talking about methane emissions. And really what they're talking about is where do we need to get to by 2030? And really the meat processing industry is committed to reduce methane emissions. Global standards are about 30% reduction by 2030. And so NAMI, which is the North American Meat Animal Institute, which represents about 90% of all red meat production, has basically committed to reduce methane emissions. This is kind of a larger trend within the industry to kind of show what is the animal agriculture, what are we doing to reduce emissions. And particularly when we talk about methane, which tends to be short-lived, basically 10 years, but more volatile than, let's say, CO2. I think the cattle industry and even other livestock industries have the ability to really lead forward in this space and show that not only are we reducing, but we're also maybe even sequestering more carbon than we're releasing.
We've talked about cattle prices, hit on the packers just now, and I want to make sure I ask you if you've been seeing any data or things you can share with us when it comes to consumers' reaction to the price of beef. There's always a lot of chatter out there. Is the consumer going to stop buying beef because of some of these higher prices? What's the data show?
Yeah, so when we're talking about consumer demand, we always have to consider it's not quantity consumed, it's always a price and a quantity together. And probably the biggest information out there is the Meat Demand Monitor out of K-State. they produce monthly consumer estimates on this. And what we've really shown over the last 3 to 6 months is that people's willingness to pay or how much they want to purchase an item for hasn't really changed across the primary commodities, ground beef, ribeye, chicken breast. And so that hasn't changed a lot. And when we're talking about the values that they use in there, it hasn't really changed. People are still valuing taste, preference, of course, quality, and price. And so that's a good sign that people are being robust. However, in their kind of monthly report, they do provide some unique questions that are specific to a given month. This past October, they asked, how are you adjusting to inflation? And really, people aren't substituting like we would normally see between, let's say, beef and pork and chicken. Really what we're seeing them do is just buy less of the item they prefer. And so they're buying fewer quantity or they're buying smaller packages. So someone who likes beef is going to continue to buy beef. They're just going to buy less of it. So that's kind of the way people are really adapting to inflation as far as consuming animal protein.
Well, as we wrap today's conversation up, Elliott, hard to believe, but we are about ready to put a bow on 2022. As we do so, for our cattle producers in particular today, what kind of considerations should they be maybe thinking about this time of year?
Yeah, so this year has really been kind of crazy when we think about kind of the herd liquidation that's been happening, ongoing drought considerations. So for people who have considered or have sold cattle throughout this year, I think getting together with the tax consultant can really be beneficial and your accountant to kind of see where you're at. Though it's going to be a larger consideration potentially this year than it has been in the past. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but we just want to make sure that we're set up financially going into 2023.
Some good thoughts. Elliott, appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bryce.
Now, coming up next week, we'll be joined by Darren Fessler of Lakefront Futures and Options. If you have a question you'd like for me to ask Darren, be sure to email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll be sure to pass your question along. A lot has certainly changed in irrigation technology since Richard Rinke built his first electro-gator center pivot back in the late 1960s. Back then, that first unit was quite unique as the first reversible electric drive center pivot on the market. It also allowed for continuous rotation in a span of over 100 feet in length. Rinke center pivots built at a plant near Deschler, Nebraska have continued to push the envelope in technology, but that first electro-gator is still out of the field watering crops each summer. It's only about a mile or so down the road from Rinke's headquarters. You can read more about it in the November issue of the Nebraska Farmer. It is now time to shift our attention over to weather with Nebraska Extension Ag climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al, we're starting to get into the colder weather, but for the most part, much of the state has avoided snowfall. Could that soon change?
Well, Bryce, we just didn't see the snowfall across the state, but we did see some freezing drizzle portions of northwest and north central Nebraska as the cold air come behind that frontal system that we talked about last week, bringing the big upper air low into the northern plains and creating blizzard-like conditions across the Dakotas. Further to the east of the front, of course, we've seen the warmer temperatures and near record to record temperatures across portions of eastern Nebraska as temperatures moved up into the mid to upper 70s. So when you looked at from front of the front and behind the front, anywhere from a 35 to a 50-degree temperature change over about a 30-mile stretch. So a pretty impressive cold front. This would have been the springtime. Probably when dealing with some pretty significant severe weather. We just didn't have the upper air support to push off that type of conditions into the fall period. More importantly, we do have a couple more systems that are going to be moving through this troughing pattern that's going to establish itself over the central United States with this cooler air. The biggest question is where will those systems go and how will they impact Nebraska? And right now it doesn't look very promising, but things can change, so keep an eye up on the weather. We'll try to give you the latest in terms of where we think things are going to go. So in terms of today, we're looking at the about upper air trough. We got a northwest flow on the backside. It's going to keep us reinforced with some cooler air. We're dealing with a little bit of cloud cover, but mostly it's just going to be a very cool advection into our region. And then this system will move off toward the east and allow some of these systems to the west of us to start progressing toward our area. So as we go into tomorrow, we see that the trough finally starts to weaken over the Great Lakes. Another piece of energy is going to rotate around the backside of this trough and bring us a reinforcing shot of cool air. But as we go into tomorrow, we're going to see a little bit warmer temperatures than we've seen today. So we're going to be looking at the mid-40s, possibly the upper 40s in the southwest, low 40s across the southeast. As you get toward the South Dakota border, we're probably going to be dealing in the mid-30s. On Monday, this upper air low starts to get more intense across the Dakotas, brings some more renewed snowfall, nothing major, and then that will shift off toward the east. One piece of energy in the southern stream will move across Texas and give the eastern portion of the state a decent shot of moisture. Then we pay attention to the upstream trough that will come in later into the week. So as we go into Tuesday, this trough starts to dig toward the southwestern United States. The upper air low moves toward the Great Lakes. We get a little temporary ridging here, so a slight boost in temperatures, 4 or 5 degrees. So we're looking at the low 40s across the southern part of the state, and looking at the upper 30s across the northern part of the state. As we get into the midweek period, here comes that low into the southwest. It's going to move right toward Texas, and if we turn our attention to the northern stream, another piece of energy starts to move its way down toward the south. That will start to bear on the northern plains and the central plains as we get into later in the week. So here we are on Thursday. We start to see the trough moving across Texas, generating some decent moisture. So that's going to intercept any moisture coming into this front. But we will start to look at colder temperatures moving into the northern plains, and we'll be reinforcing that as we get into Nebraska on Friday as this front starts to sag toward the southern Rockies and central Rockies. There may be some upslope flow across the Panhandle, but as you get farther away from the Panhandle, we don't look like we're going to see much in the way of significant moisture. So if we're going to see accumulations with this system at this point in time, it looks to be primarily the Nebraska Panhandle and the areas just to the east of the Rockies in Colorado and in Wyoming. Now, as we look even farther from next Thursday following Tuesday, we keep that cold air in place as we get reinforcing shots of cold air. And in terms of precipitation, looks like drier than normal conditions from the southwest up through Iowa, and most of the Pacific Northwest is wetter than normal. So the biggest issue will be, as we get into that close to Thanksgiving time period, whether or not this trough does build in, because that's going to bring up a big ridging pattern, and that's what's being advertised. So as we get into Thanksgiving, we may actually see a little bit better conditions than we've been experiencing for the next week or so.
Thank you for that information, as always, Al. Finally, today, some high school students might be eyeing an early graduation here in the coming months. For those seeking a degree in an agricultural field of study, the University of Nebraska Lincoln offers some of the best opportunities in the country. However, some might not want to jump into a 4-year commitment. Luckily, the Nebraska College of Technical Agriculture can offer students the opportunity to earn a degree within 2 years with great prospects for employment or a springboard into continuing their education at the collegiate level. We had an opportunity to recently catch up with NCTA admissions recruiter Rutland Taylor to learn more about what potential NCTA students can expect from their experience.
NCTA is a 2-year technical college that provides hands-on experience to students who want to further their education in the agricultural field.
What's really cool about NCTA is everything we do is agricultural in nature. All of our programs, all of our teams, clubs, everything has a basis in agriculture, you know, because it is such an important part of our lives. You know, we got to eat food, we have to do all these things, and agriculture is really important. Some benefits of doing an ag program at NCTA is, number one, it's going to be very hands-on. A lot of our students, they want that hands-on practical experience so that they then can step into careers and be very, very successful. So, you know, NCTA, we try to facilitate that with livestock and animals on campus, equipment. We have 2,000 acres of rangeland, so we have a lot of facilities to help the students get that really good hands-on experience at NCTA.
Most planners, you're going to have...
For someone looking to have a career in an agricultural-based field, NCTA has a very high success rate for job placements to students who graduate from there.
We get, I would say, probably double to triple the amount of job offers than we have graduating students. There's just such a high demand for students in these technical agricultural programs. You know, we need students that are going into welding, agronomy, livestock management, and so there's companies that will hire our students right off, and so job placement is really high coming out of NCTA.
Being a part of the University of Nebraska system makes it simple for students at NCTA to transfer to UNL if they'd like to further their education beyond 2 years.
A huge benefit of NCTA is we're part of the University of Nebraska system. So that means that we're partnered with the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and so it makes it really easy for a student to come to NCTA, get 2 years of really high quality education that then sets them up well for you know, classes and schooling afterwards. So, you know, it's really easy for a student to come to NCTA and transfer into UNL, but we also have students that go to other institutions.
NCTA is a low-cost institution with great scholarships and financial aid available. The goal is to provide students with an affordable education while still getting the experience needed to set them up for success in their future careers.
Right off the bat, NCTA is a low-cost institution, so our tuition rate is $139 a credit hour, which means that a student isn't going to pay a lot of money for that education, and that's the way we want it. We want our students to come get a really affordable education that then sets them up well for future careers. So on top of being very affordable, there's terrific scholarships that are available through the school and also through other organizations. You know, we have a great academic scholarship that if a student has a decent GPA in high school, that's going to get them a good scholarship and help pay for tuition and all of that. So there's definitely a lot of ways to fund your education at NCTA.
If you're interested in learning more about NCTA, there are several dates to take advantage of to see the facilities, meet the professors, and get some hands-on experience while you're there.
Yeah, we definitely want people to come down, check out the facilities, check out the school. So you can do that. You can go to ncta.unl.edu. You can schedule your own personal tour anytime Monday through Thursday throughout the year. We also have terrific days called Discovery Days. So it's a time when students can come with their friends, family, whoever they want. They get to tour the whole campus, meet all the professors, the programs, and they get to do an activity with these people. So, you know, if you're coming down and you want to check out the mechanics and welding, well, they've gone and they tear apart an engine with the ag instructor. Or if you're in the vet tech, they go and do a procedure with a vet tech instructor. So it's just a terrific time to come and check out. We have 2 of those in the fall and 2 in the spring, and you can find those dates online at ncta.unl.edu under the Discovery Days tab, and definitely come check out NCTA.
There are many benefits to furthering your education at NCTA. Low tuition rates, hands-on experience, small class sizes, and high job placement are just a few to be had. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.
Thanks for the story, Mike. If you'd like to learn more about the events and opportunities available at the Nebraska College of Technical Agriculture out there at Curtis, we've posted a helpful link along with this story. You can find them both on the Market Journal website. Well, that is going to do it for this week's show. Do remember, if you missed a story, you can follow the Market Journal team on YouTube and social media to join in on the conversation. We hope to see you back here next time. Until then, I'm Bryce Tuskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.